Welcome to the 22nd meetup of the Formbird Fleet Professionals community. My name is Paul, and I'm going to switch my view to speaker. It's great to see everybody here, and thank you for taking the time out of your day. I know you're all busy, so it's great that you can be here. And we've got plenty to talk about, and we want to hear from you if you want to have something to say. So today, Adam and Paul are going to present some exciting and interesting things. First up, we're going to talk about recording plant hours. If I miss anything, Adam, just let me know. Managing hired assets is the next one, which Adam will also present. And then we're going to do digital pre-starts, or daily driver check sheets, as some people call them, completions and exceptions from Geotab. So that's actually a very much hotly requested feature, which allows basically alerting against Geotab. So if a vehicle needs a pre-start and it moves on the day without a pre-start, it will create and send an exception that the pre-start wasn't done. So that sort of is a great thing for in terms of just keeping an eye on what's happening with people and not doing their pre-starts. Okay, so and really this is just part of as Formbird Fleet continues to integrate further with Geotab, and we've recently taken on board a couple of new organisations for that who have opted to use Geotab and Formbird integration. All right, so any of those topics that you thought were worth listening to, you can jump to them using the timestamps in the description. So there's a timestamp against each thing that we do today, and you can just jump there. Okay, this is just I know this is a little bit annoying. We're finding some invites are not getting through, and why that is usually to do with spam filtering, and that's happening at your end. So spam, our invites get sent and then they get blocked by spam because we are sending out an invite or a promotion, and there's AI involved, of course, and the AI detects that we're sending this out. So if you get a chance, and if you're not getting your invite, pop into your IT department and say, hey guys, can you whitelist everything from formbird.com? It'll also help with any other alerts and so on that you might be missing out on. Okay, now, if you do have anything to say, if you're shy, you can do it a chat in the chat, or if you want to say something, just you don't have to put up your hands, you just start yelling through your microphone. Make sure you're unmuted at that point. So let's get on with it. Oh, Adam is our what would you call him? Well, what would you call him? He is a Formbird Fleet consultant at large. And we love to hear from Adam, and he's going to tell us what he's going to talk about, and then tell us about what he's talked about.
Yeah, thanks, Paul. So we've been working with Anthony Davies, who's on this call, around recording plant hours digitally. So Anthony's kind of given us a bit of background about their process at Forbes, and we've done some work. Paul really has done the work. Paul Arkell has done the work building a process into Formbird Fleet so it can be done digitally within the system. So what I'll do is I'll share my screen and go through a bit of that functionality. But first, really the purpose of these plant hours is to capture the amount of time that an asset is assigned to a particular activity, and that information kind of serves two key purposes. The first one being reporting on time utilization, so that the time that an asset is actually assigned to an activity versus not assigned to any activity. But then also looking at calculating and reporting on the cost of that utilization, and that's to generate as another method to generate income for the fleet department to justify the costs of running the asset. So time utilization here differs a little bit from like meter utilization, so like hour meter utilization. Because that's only really providing information about how far the asset has traveled, or how long the engine's been running for. Those are obviously really important, but we also need to understand how long the asset's being assigned to jobs or particular activities. And that's particularly the case, as you've described, Anthony, for assets that, you know, might be trailered from the yard or might sit at a job site but be critical to that work and be assigned to that job for the period. So some of the benefits of integrating it into Formbird Fleet, or bringing it into Formbird Fleet, moving from a paperless process. So Anthony, you've showed us your process at Forbes, and that paper process results in a lot of double handling for you, and also the data doesn't come across to your desk immediately. Like you described to us that it goes to the operator's supervisor, and then you might get it at the end of the week if it doesn't get lost on the way. If this, if that. So doing it within Formbird Fleet is going to bring that data in straight away. It'll be immediately visible to everyone who has access to Formbird Fleet. And some other benefits are that the operators need to log into less systems. There's less systems that the administrators need to maintain. All the data related to that asset is then in the one place in Formbird Fleet, and that means that there's easy reporting and exporting of that data as well. If there's any questions at any stage, feel free to interrupt me and jump in. And Anthony, if I miss anything, and Paul, Arkell, feel free to jump in and interrupt me. Just share my screen here. Can you guys see my screen now? Great.
Yeah.
Okay. So as I described in that introduction, part of this is looking at reporting on hours that the asset's assigned to a job. The job part of this is kind of optional, so it doesn't have to be used, but I'll demonstrate it in this anyway. So from our administrator homepage here, under the works management menu, we've got jobs. So we can go in here. And then we've obviously got our existing jobs that we've got set up, but we can also create a new job. So you might have seen that my other example there was Main Street renewal. So I'm going to pick another generic kind of thing and call it Station Street renewal. Give it a job costing number. I'll give it a job started date and a job completed date. We'll just chuck that back in July or something. And we'll leave it as not job completed at the moment. Entering that job completed date will mean that it's not selectable on the plant hours record. We can give it a description, and we can also give it an address as well. Just find a Station Street somewhere, hopefully in Australia. Oh, Fairfield, that's not too far from my house. And then I can click the save tick in the top left here to save those changes and create the job. All right, so that's my job created there. So now I will go back to my homepage, and I'll switch to an operator view of the world so we can see what it looks like for an operator completing the plant hours, creating that plant hours record, now that we've got that job configured there. I'll just check that you guys can still see this works management operator menu. Yes?
Yep.
Great, thanks, Paul. Okay, so now I'm looking at the application from an operator's point of view, maybe on a tablet kind of size. These are my assets that I allocated to or I'm responsible for. So I've got one that I'm going to use here, which is 265F. I can click that to select it, and then I've got my actions that I can take on this particular asset. In this case, I'm going to create a plant hours record. I can say who's it's created by. This is a little gremlin that we discovered. So this will actually auto-populate with the logged in user, which is Adam Griffith operator, but I'll just fill that in there. You can also change this. So this is removable as well. So I can remove it and say that actually, Paul, that you created it. Oh, no, I can't, sorry. Adam Gristwood administrator created it, say. I can give it a created date, and then I can say the hours that it was used for. I can assign it to a job as well. So I can select that job that I just created there. And then you can see if I open this panel, we've got the job details there. So it populates across some brief details. There is another option here where you don't actually select the job, and you can manually enter the job details if it hasn't been configured in the system, and also save those details as a new job. So if we call this Station Street renewal and give it a job costing number, and I can give it an address. And again, so I haven't actually picked the job that I've configured here. I'm just manually entering these details, and then I'm going to choose to save the job and click save. And you can see that that has taken those details and actually created a job for us. So it's a one-step process, if you like, for the operator to create the details of the job. Any questions so far there, Anthony? Or comments?
Yeah, if I'm sure this doesn't happen at any other council except Forbes, but if finance haven't created the work order number, is that a free text option?
Correct.
You put where you actually worked and then it gets created a day or two later?
Yeah, so you can, none of these fields are mandatory. So I'm pretty sure you could create this without a job costing number and then add that in later. Paul, would that be right?
Yeah, that's right. It depends where you create it. If you create it on the job itself, it'll be on the job. If you create it there on the plant hours, it'll be only on the plant hours for that particular instance.
Yeah. I guess just thinking on my feet here, one approach in that situation might be you wouldn't select a job. You might give it a job name. So say Station Street renewal. And then you might give it a job description and say no work order number yet created. Finance, and instead of clicking save the job, you could just save the plan hours record. And then later you could come back to this plan hours record and actually enter the job number. So say it's J998, sorry, that's 9986. And then at that point, once you have the job number, you could decide to create the job and then save the plan hours record.
Yep.
And that creates the job there.
That makes sense.
Cool.
Yeah, so when I was doing it, Anthony, I thought the job might be there or it might not be there, which is why there's two ways to sort of do it.
Yeah, that's good.
Just create it as you're doing it. If you don't have a job, to actually populate the job field up above first.
Yeah.
Yeah. Obviously, in an ideal world, the operator doesn't have to do that, but as we know, there's always exceptions in organizational processes, and I think this really well accommodates that. Yeah.
Yep.
There might be a little bit of training the operators about what to do if the job's not there. So that might be a bit of an organizational thing of saying, oh, if the job's not yet in the system, don't create it. And then it's like a retrospective process of going back into this record and saving it as a job.
Yeah, I see it as the same for the operator as when they're manually writing out a plant sheet. If they don't know the work order number, they'll just put the job description, and that sort of covers that base for me. So
perfect. Cool.
Yeah.
Just a quick question with that. How does that integrate back with your finance? We use Authority 7.1. So how does that job number integrate backwards or forwards in and out of Authority state?
Anthony, how would you deal with that?
We actually key it in manually. But I'm guessing because we key it in off every individual plant sheet, but I'm guessing if you recorded it all in Formbird, we'd be able to get a final report, like a weekly report, where it's keyed in all off that report. That's what I'm guessing. We'll get to that, Adam, will we? But
correct. Yes. Yeah. So I think the process that you've described, Anthony, that you're kind of looking for is the data to be collected in Formbird and then that to be easily exportable out to then move across to Authority, basically.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
Great. I'll move into the next part, which is kind of looking at that reporting. So I'll just jump back to my administrative view of the world here, and I've got some of my reports are already open for myself. So we've got plant hours records here. So actually, sorry, I'll go back to my administrator homepage. In my reports and listings section down here, if I remove that, I want to find my plant hours report. So I'll just type in plant and then my plant hour records there. So I'll click on that. It'll open the report. So you can see this has got all of the plant hours that I've created when I've been testing, and those ones that one that I created just now. So you can see here in the job description, it has no work order number yet created by finance. That'd be a clear indication, I think, that there needs to be action on this. Obviously, you might not have the link to the job there with that note. And then you could go into that plant hours record that the operator's created and then update it with the details of the job. We can also filter this. So we can filter by date. So say we want to see all of the plant hour records from July onwards, we can do that. Or maybe we want to see them all from August onwards, we can do that. If I just move that time down, done. So you can see that that's got all the ones I've created in August. Then you can further filter it by the column filters here. So if I want to see all of the plant hours records related to a specific job, I can type in J987 and I've got all of those plant hours records that have been assigned to that job. And then we've got our CSV export here as well. So you can export just those plant hours records if you want to. And then that's what you'll use when you're importing into Authority, I'd say. But obviously we've got to make sure that process will work for you, Anthony, when we roll it out.
I changed the date filters yesterday to filter by day, not by time.
Oh, really? Great.
Yeah.
Cool. Yeah. Thanks, Paul. So the other place that this shows up, so that I guess that's really from the job costing point of view. This is where you're getting the data out. The other side of this is generating income for the fleet department as well. So if I go back to my home page and I go to my operating cost summary report, and if I use some preset times, I'll do last month. So you can see that's pre-populated the 1st of July to the 31st of July. I'm actually going to extend that out for this run of the report to say to the end of August. So I'll do that 2-month period. I want my income source in this case to be plant hours. And I'm just going to select one asset that I want to run this for, just so it doesn't take forever to run. And then I'll click Run Report. So you can see this has given me my details of all my expenses and incomes for this particular asset, 265F. And if I, with the viewing it on a laptop screen, obviously it's a bit cut off. So I've got my green plus symbol here that I can click to expand it out. And you can see that I've got plant hours income coming in there. And then it's also reflected down here in the graphs and the counts and everything like that. So one thing, that's kind of the end of the demo on plant hours. I'll move on to the hire in a second. But one kind of key question that really came up, I think, for me was how plant hours income relates to allocated assets or hired assets as well, because it is feasible in the system that you could have a plant hours created for an asset, and then you might be using bookings as well, and there could be income also generated from those bookings. So there's kind of a question here about how those things should relate together, I think. The way we're dealing with it at the moment in the application is that you choose your income source when you run the report. And that really means as an organization using it, you need to be really clear about like what bits of functionality you're wanting your people to use to capture income. But yeah, I guess the question here is like, how should they relate? So really, if you've got like an asset that's allocated to a person, I think there's an argument that you could say that income should be generated for each day that, or however it's been configured on the allocation to generate income on that basis. But then we need to work out some like clear rules if we want this to be, I guess, being able to take income sources from different places, that there's some rules to govern how we get that data for reporting purposes. So yeah, with that allocation example, you might say, I think Anthony, you said that, an asset that's allocated to a person permanently and only that person drives it, you take it as the plant hours being 8 hours every day, basically. But yeah, it seems like we could probably make this more efficient by not needing those people to create plant hours records. Yeah, there's obviously also that overlap with hire and asset booking as well.
Yep. Yeah, because I think at the moment when something's permanently allocated to someone, does it only work out the income off the business hours, or does it just charge every hour from then on, like including nights and weekends, etc.?
Yeah, sorry.
Sorry, I don't know off the top of my head, Anthony. I need to go and check.
I've got a funny feeling because I've done exercise with my leaseback vehicle, and I'm pretty sure it just puts the hourly hire rate for every hour thereafter where I've allocated it to myself. It doesn't actually take in the business hours. I could be wrong, but I think that's
Yeah, you're probably right, because the other way would be much harder. So I'll
yeah,
probably the easy route. That's a good question. Whether I guess the question then becomes is it valid to, if it's permanently assigned, is it income for 24 hours for everybody, or is it only for business hours, or how does that work?
yeah, we run off business hours, but I guess that's could change from council to council, or
I imagine so.
Yeah, and it might be the kind of case where we've got an opportunity at Forbes to make things more streamlined, I guess, if we can figure out what those rules are around allocations and generating income. So on the allocation, you've got the ability to select the hire rate that you want to apply, whether that's hourly, daily, weekly, or annually. So you could argue that the rate that you use on a plant hours record, which is hourly, you could set up the higher rates for weekly, for example, to be 5 times, 8 times the hourly rate to calculate that value, and then just have the allocation set up to use weekly higher rates, or maybe it's annually that you want to use. I'm not sure, but yeah, I think there's an opportunity there to explore a more efficient way of doing it, basically.
For sure. Yep.
Okay. Any other questions about plant hours?
Sorry, I think you covered it, but if you had one piece of plant that you needed to charge like 8 hours across 3 different job numbers, you can just go and add another job number if it was 3 hours, 3 hours, 2 hours, in one day.
Yeah, definitely. So you just add another plant hours record.
Yeah.
So if I go in here, plant hours record, create record. I think I probably created the last one for August. I think I might have done 8 hours, but say this one's 3 hours and it needs to go against a different job. Maybe it's doing the Main Street renewal. You can select that, create the plant hours record, and that's another record that will be counted in the reporting.
Yeah.
Okay, so moving on to managing hired assets. So this is something that came about as a result of this discussion around plant hours with Forbes, but it's also something that Golden Plains has mentioned as well, amongst some others. So I'll just talk through how we're looking at to accommodate hired assets. So those are assets that council is hiring in from budget or whoever it is, Kennards, I don't know, to within the organisation, kind of for a temporary period of time. So the real reason for this is to have the ability within the application to record pre-start checks, so daily driver check sheets within the application, and so that there's no need to duplicate processes across a paper method for hired assets versus using Formbird fleet for the council-owned permanent assets. So that's one aspect, but also it's about recording plant hours on those hired assets as well. So obviously, if you're hire a grader, for example, and you're using it on a job, you still want to record that usage on the job. So if we go to our, again on our administrator homepage here, if we go to our configuration menu and go to asset templates, and so we've actually created this in a similar way to creating a normal asset. So I'm going to still choose my asset template that I want to use. So we'll say this is a passenger vehicle. So I'll just search the table here for passenger vehicle. This is changing a little bit. So you select the row in the table there, and then you decide what you want to do. So you can create the asset as normal, obviously, but then we've also got this new create external hire asset button. So I'll click on that. So I need to give it an ID, so I'll just quickly give it an ID. I'll just use EH as external hire. I can set its allocation status, so I'll say it's permanently assigned. I need to decide a responsible workshop. I can choose whether it has meters, and this will determine whether on the daily driver check sheet the operators are required to enter the meter readings of the asset. I can imagine that might be useful for assets that you're using over a longer term that you want to know if it's ready for its service going back to the supplier or however it is. If you don't have that configured, then the operator won't be required to enter the primary meter readings or secondary meter readings on the pre-starts when they're completing those. Let's use one. I'll just use me as the responsible person. The name of regular assets is typically made up of asset ID, the make and model, and the registration. In this particular case, we've changed it a little bit, so it's actually made up of the ID that we're entering here, the name descriptor field, and then the supplier name and the registration number if it's there. So it'll use any of those things in the name of the asset. The relevance of that is when you're searching the asset or looking for its name against a document or whatever else, that's kind of how it will be represented. So in this case, the name descriptor, you might want to use like the reference of the hire given by the hire company. So maybe it's ref 9999. We'll give it a make and a model. So we'll say this is a Toyota Corolla, and we'll give it a registration number. And we'll say that, yes, we do want daily drivers checks to be completed by operators using this vehicle. We need to give it our hourly hire rate. So this is the rate that we used if any plant hours records are created against this asset. It'll also be used for any hires, like asset bookings that are done against this asset as well. So we'll give this a hire rate of $12.50. That's kind of just based on a daily kind of hire rate for this kind of vehicle of like $100 divided by 8. It's kind of a rudimentary kind of estimate. We can choose the supplier of where it's coming from. And we can give it an expected hire completion. So we'll say, I don't know, the end of August. And we've got auto dispose here. So what this means is that I'm expecting the hire to be completed on the 31st of August. At that point, I want the system to auto dispose of this asset. So automatically say that we've disposed of it, and the disposal method will be hire return. The expected hire cost, that's the expected cost to council. So this is looking about income, recouping that income for the cost of the asset. This is looking at the expected hire cost of this asset. So for a month, I don't know, I'm not that good at maths on my feet, but we'll say it's going to cost us $3,000 for the month. Probably an underestimate. Oh, it's probably actually not too bad. That's probably reasonable. We've got a hire status here. So I'll say it's in progress, meaning that we've actually got the asset at council. And we've got the actual hire cost as well. So we might be expecting it's going to cost $3,000, but then we actually return it early and it only costs us $2,000, for example. So Paul has been doing some tweaks to this, so I think it is going to probably change a little bit when it gets released, but more or less this is kind of the functionality that we're working with. We still can access the expanded view of the hire assets. So this is really a cut down view to make it as easy as possible to enter the data against the asset. And so you're only having to look at the stuff that's relevant necessarily, but you still do have access to that expanded view where you can configure available for hire days and times, business hours, business times, all of that sort of stuff as well. It's still available on these assets, but it's just kind of hidden away behind the expanded view there. If I go back to my administrator homepage here, where I can find these externally hired assets is on my administrator homepage or the asset list report for technicians and supervisors on their homepages. You can see it here. So we've got our regular asset list. So that's all of our normal assets. And then we've got also our externally hired asset list. So you can see these externally hired assets, including those ones that I just created. So I'll just swap to an operator view of the world, just to give you a little quick demo. I'll go back to the homepage for the operator. And so if I go in here, I can see that my external hire 123 that I created is here because I assigned it to this person. Always you can access any asset by clicking the all filter here. I select my asset. I'm presented with this select action dialog box. In this case, I'm just going to go with create a daily driver check sheet just to show that you can do it. So this is for an externally hired asset. You can see how it appears here with the ID, the name descriptor from the hired asset, the supplier, and the registration in the name. I can enter my high meter reading, so it's a pretty new asset, so it's only done 5,000 Ks, say. Then I can go through just as normal, really, and say what passes and fails in the checks. These checks will be based on the asset template that you use to create it. So if you remember, I used the passenger vehicle asset template to create it. So it's going to use those checks that are configured for passenger vehicles on these this external hired asset. I can, when there's a fault, obviously I need to say whether it's urgent, the fleet's out of service, or non-urgent. We'll just go with non-urgent in the workshop, defect inspection complete. And then these daily driver check sheets that are completed against external hire assets will just go into the regular workflow. So in this case, because it's non-urgent fleet operational, it's going to be in that daily driver check sheet dashboard, which I can show you. So if I switch back to my administrator view of the world and I go into works management and daily driver check sheets, and I will display all of them, but only the failed ones. So you can see this one here that I just created is immediately available in this dashboard. It can be actioned. Now, for externally hired assets, you might not do stuff internally, so you might not want to turn it into a request for the workshop, or you may want to track it in that way. But yeah, there's the functionalities there. I think there are some circumstances when you guys might do the maintenance on the asset or the repair on the asset. Yeah, that's where the functionality goes though. So from there onwards, it's basically the same as a regular asset. So then reporting of this, it shows up in a few different reports. So again, in my operating cost summary report, it'll show up in this one. So if I go to date, change that back to July. Oh no, I wanted to select an asset, sorry. Just refresh that. And last month. No. So it then shows up in this report. So externally hired assets will show up alongside your regular assets in this this operating cost summary. Then we've also got the asset invoice report as well, so it'll also show up in there, where you can select your, the month that you want to run it for, and then run the report. I'm not going to go through that now. I'm a bit short on time. Any questions on the externally hired stuff, Anthony? Does that look good from what you were thinking?
Yeah, I like it. Just one question. That one that you just created, did you say that there was a full asset template for that?
Yeah, correct. So I'll just go back to my admin homepage here, go back into my externally hired asset list, just refresh the data table there so that it shows up. So then, yeah, I can just go into here and select it. So I can go into it here. So you can still say I want to configure this asset for asset booking, for example. I can go into its expanded view. So this is where you see the full asset. So you've got all your usual fields. I can go to my booking and hire section.
Expense.
Sorry?
So you can still go in and create an expense, and if you scanned in the monthly hire invoice, you could keep it in there, and then you've got a record of what it cost you.
Absolutely. Yeah. And yeah, you can configure hire days. So if you're hiring this asset to be a pool car, for example, you can configure it with hire days and times, and then it will appear, and add it to a vehicle pool, and then it will appear on the booking form for booking.
Yeah, that's great.
Hey, Adam, can we just go back to the creation again?
Yeah, of course. New one?
Yeah, new one.
Yep.
So those three buttons down the bottom, the full view creates the asset with all of the information available. The next button across the condensed view creates an asset just like the external hire asset with a cut down view, but it's not an external hire asset. It's just a standard asset. But what it does do is it groups all of the mandatory fields into one space. So it's faster to create a, like if you just need to create an asset really quickly, it's faster to create it just with the mandatory fields there. The population of the mandatory fields for an asset, it's basically, they're all pre-populated. If there's only one responsible workshop, it'll pre-populate that as well. So it's really, it could be as simple as a one click, enter an ID, and you've got an asset to work with quickly. So I just thought I'd cover that too.
Yep.
Yeah, so then when you save that, you can see it's immediately just that full asset. But yeah, as you said, Paul, it's moving all those mandatory fields so they're all in the one place, and you kind of have less information on the screen to look at as you're quickly just creating an asset.
Yeah, something else that's relevant there. We had this exact thing yesterday with a tractor roller where I had to send one of my guys out to fix a small issue, and it was a 4-hour job. Well, by tracking it in Formbird at the end of the month, you could potentially be taking that off the price of the hire, etc. So that's a great option for me.
Cool, great. Anyone else on the call want to ask any questions or provide any feedback on plant hours or hired assets? No? Cool. All right. Well, I'll stop sharing my screen and hand over to Paul Arkell to talk about the daily driver exceptions from Geotab.
Let's set up a share screen. You see that?
Yep.
Yep, got that.
Very good.
Yep.
Okay, so I'll start from the asset system admin menu. The way to find, basically what happens is the system will go through on every 15-minute basis, query Geotab for any entity known as a trip. So a trip indicates that the vehicle's moved somewhere. If it finds a trip and the asset is supposed to have had a daily driver check, it will raise what's called a daily driver exception report document. So the way to set up a daily driver, your daily driver checks are here in asset use. If it has a daily driver check required and it has Geotab and the Geotab is configured, it will raise, and it's taken a trip, it will create a document called an exception document like this. The exception document records the date it was created, the asset, the driver's names, surnames, the trip start and trip stop information. This is using Bega's information at the moment. The way it does that is it grabs the driver information from Geotab. So it really relies on having that information in Geotab, clearly.
Does it pick it up off the fob, Paul?
It picks it up off the trip, Anthony.
Okay. Yep.
Yeah, so there's a number of ways. I think there's engine starts and all that sort of stuff, but I chose trip. It seemed to be the thing to use. Could be wrong, but it seems it's working okay with a trip. This is a set of documents recorded for today. And it's been checked 12 minutes ago. You can see the set of documents is 120 or something, 160 documents. So it'll check every 15 minutes. So if the car's moved anywhere within 15 minutes, it'll generate one of these documents. When it generates that document, it can be configured to send an email to either the person who's driving it and that's providing the driver has an email address in Geotab. If that's not the case, it can be configured to send an email to a default email address, or a notification set up. So in the account, we have a set of notifications, and you can set up a notification to say notify me when certain actions happen. So that's included in this set of notification documents. So you basically subscribe to a notification for Geotab exception reporting, and you'll get an email. I've also got it configured so that it will, because you don't want 164 emails all in your inbox all at once. I've got it configured so that it'll compile a set of compile a list of exception, compile an email with a table that lists out all of the exceptions throughout the day, and that's sent out at midnight. The way this is used in the system is basically to show we have a daily driver report, and against this report is basically was it supposed to be checked, and if it's not checked, it'll have a not completed dot. If it's got a daily driver exception, it'll have a little hat. So basically, you can see from this report that it's supposed to have been checked, but it hasn't been checked. So it's used in that way. It's also used on the daily driver completed and not completed in a similar way. So basically, if you search for the asset, you'll get the thing was supposed to have been created, but it hasn't. And that was the person who didn't create it, basically. That same report is available here. So at the moment, it's not, this functionality has been installed in all the production environments, but isn't actually switched on. So there's a little bit of configuration work to do to make that happen. How's that sound? Confused?
Just on the driver, does that come through off the responsible person in Formbird, or?
It comes off the driver in Geotab, Anthony.
Yeah.
So when it goes to Geotab, there's an entity called driver.
Yeah.
It'll grab the driver from that field in Geotab. If that field's an email address, which I checked yours and I checked Bega's, and both of those have been configured as drivers with email addresses, it can send an email from that particular address. The reason for that is because drivers may change and Formbird might not know about it.
Yeah.
It's more likely that Geotab are going to know about it because there's things like Forbes and other bits and pieces that can log you in and out of the vehicle. So I've chosen that. I could equally get it from the responsible person.
No, I think it's definitely better through, but I just wondered if because we don't actually set up in Geotab the drivers, it's actually worked out off the fobs, like you said. So
okay, that's interesting because I did check how your drivers were set up, and they're all set up with emails. So
yeah.
I just figured that was a standard setup and went with that.
So it would be in there because someone had fobbed onto the vehicle, I'm guessing.
I'm not 100% sure of how the fobs work.
Okay.
We've got Andrew from GeoSecure on the call. Andrew, are you able to provide us any insight on that?
Yeah, sure.
Thanks. Sorry, I've gone you out of the blue.
I'm listening. I'm quite listening in the background.
Yeah.
So just to clarify then, so I mean a user account in Geotab is assigned with a fob ID, sticker, tag, doesn't really matter which one, but it's got a unique ID against that particular user may happen to be a driver. So as soon as that fob or sticker is waved in front of a reader, it's just going to assign the person that's attached to that fob ID to that asset for the duration of that trip or operation. Once they ignition off, then they're fobbed off, they're logged off effectively after 30 seconds, depending on the timer settings.
And that changes, and Andrew, that changes the actual driver
Yes.
in Geotab, yep.
Yeah, so if I,
Okay,
I mean,
right.
if I just, I wave this in front of a reader now, it's going to go, Andrew's now driving this.
Yep.
And then once I ignition off, or someone else fobs on, for example, it's just going to take the last read of the fob, and that will assign that person to that asset for the duration of that trip.
Yep.
And as I say, depending on the timer settings in the audio feedback, typically 30 seconds. Once it's ignition off, 30 seconds later, drops that driver, that operator from the asset.
Okay. Well, that's for our purposes, that's pretty good, providing I'm primarily using that information for an email address right now.
Yep.
If Geotab's not configured as an email, like if that field is not configured as an email, what I'd probably need to do is get whatever that is and try and match it up with a Formbird account, which is an email address.
Yeah, right.
So
I think most accounts and are email addresses, right?
Yeah, we tried to set them all up the same as the account management in Formbird.
Yeah, I'm not aware of many implementations, certainly from a council perspective, where email addresses aren't used for operators and drivers.
Yeah.
good. So I lucked out. Great.
but let me know if you need we need to jump on a call and go through that in a bit more detail, just to make sure that all lines up. Then just let me know. But it's pretty straightforward from that perspective. I mean, we have got some other non-council clients where they're not effectively employees all of the time, so they're slightly more transient, and then we might get John Smith or something. As much as it is supported in Geotab, they don't like it because it's a bit loose in terms of security. That's all.
Yep. You can see here that there's some documents came back without any driver associated with it. In that instance, what I've tried to do is basically set up a default email in Formbird that says, I can't find somebody to email about this, use the default. So that's how I've set this up at the moment.
Okay, so it's essentially a fallback email address.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Like I said, there's a number of ways. I'm not sure that everybody's going to want an email when they don't do what they're supposed to do. So we can switch that off, and we can just send it out as a report at the end of the day, basically saying these people, these assets have not had a daily driver check against them.
Yeah, Paul, I recall we discussed the rollout of this and how it might be implemented, and we've definitely got some reservations about going full steam ahead with emails to every person when they don't do the right thing. I think ideally we'd have a bit of a step in there where we roll out the functionality but deliberately don't send emails to the drivers, just to make sure that the system's running in the correct way first, but then also thinking about like that culture change process and whether emails from a system is the best way to create that behavior change in the organization. That's something to think about with implementing this, I think.
So that's kind of it. There are a number of dependencies between Formbird and Geotab. Hopefully that they all kind of lined up.
Yeah, Paul, I just double checked that particular database, and every user has got an email against them. So maybe we can have a chat offline about that one, and we'll work out why that might not return something.
That's good. Okay. Good. So that's about this report's available in just the standard reporting tools here under exception.
And do those come up as well in the daily, that full daily driver completed report as well?
Yeah. Well, it's summarised as them
Yeah,
in
yeah.
this instance.
Oh, yeah, perfect. Yeah, just like it's on the asset. Yeah.
Yeah, so I've sort of not taken any more action other than just saying, presenting some information. So, you can see the daily driver was supposed to have been created by these dots and
Yep.
by this column,
Mm.
and you can see if it hasn't been created
Yep.
by Geotab. So yeah, that's kind of it.
So then if we clear the filter on the asset column there, we'd get the full list of all the assets, and whether or not the daily driver has been done or not.
Yeah.
Yeah, perfect. Cool. Thanks, Paul.
I think I can sort.
I've got one other quick question.
Go for it.
Not sure if it's an Andrew or a Paul question. Does geofencing come into this at all? If I was to geofence the depot, say, and a vehicle had left the depot without a pre-start being done, would that? I'm guessing that's information from Geotab into Formbird, sort of thing. Is that a possibility, or?
Well, I can find the position of the vehicle at any particular time. So, and we can set up a boundary. So yes, that would be possible.
Yeah.
Yeah, and if those boundaries are configured in Geotab, hopefully we can find that through the integration.
They would be configured in Formbird, and we would get the actual location of the vehicle and then check whether it was within or without of that boundary.
Yeah.
And then we could do that. At the moment, Anthony, it's just basically saying, has it moved?
Yeah.
But it probably needs to be moved quite a bit because a trip takes a little bit to actually trigger, I think. You need to actually move for a certain amount of time, I believe.
Yeah, okay.
It was 15 minutes or something was in my head.
I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, Paul, Paul, in theory, in reality, we could, we could generate a message to Formbird fleet that vehicle has departed a boundary, a geofence.
Okay.
I just don't know how easy that would get for you, but using the kind of rules, and we can even send a web call if that was easier. But we can generate a kind of a hook or any notification to Formbird fleet for any event ultimately that would then invoke some functionality or end.
That's good. I'll need to talk to you a little bit more about that because
let's have a chat. I think that I can see a couple of areas where that would work really well.
At the moment, I'm basically just polling, Andrew.
I think we could tell you, almost immediately when something of interest has happened, that which then invoke the feature functionality on Formbird fleet.
Yeah.
So it's only as good as the boundaries of the geofence ultimately, but as soon as that boundary is crossed, we can generate that trigger.
That's really good. That would be very interesting. So that would make my life a little bit easier.
And I think I've answered. I can answer the other one for you as well. Why that was coming back blank?
Okay.
Because that particular client is using the personal mode feature, and they'd left themselves in personal mode, like permanently by those things. We're not going to see any personal information about that vehicle. So as much as they might have fobbed on, we won't be able to see that because they're effectively in private mode. And that will be why you haven't got a driver email address against that, because it's
excellent.
masked.
I didn't know that either. So that's really good.
Yeah, I wonder if we can see that when you're getting the trip data from Geotab, Paul. You might be able to present that in Formbird.
I don't know. I hadn't seen it, but there's a lot of data come back from Geotab, and it's all a bit unless you kind of know what you're looking for, it's a little bit cryptic.
Yeah, definitely.
So it'd be another question for Andrew, I guess.
No worries. Let's take that offline, and we'll set up a call, and I can just run you through some of this stuff.
I'll just show you some of the other stuff I've just done with Geotab too, just out of interest. It's not related to this daily driver, but we've done. I've had a muck around with trips and displaying actual location. So this basically just goes and gets the location whenever this is refreshed. But I also grabbed trip information for a week, so you can see where the vehicle's been on a week and on a daily basis through the week.
Oh, that's great, Paul.
There might not be anything that day. And that's scrollable, so we can scroll back through time and get week blocks to see what's going on. So yeah, that's just another thing.
I can see another job for you here, Paul.
I don't think so. I've
I
got
reckon
enough jobs, Anthony.
there's something really cool that could happen there if a vehicle's done a trip but no plan hours have been recorded. That would be something that every fleet manager would be pretty keen to see.
Okay, that's pretty easy actually, that one.
Yeah.
I'll hit a question back to you here, Anthony. I can see there's a parallel between asset booking and plant hours. So if you think about, well, in my mind, if you book an asset for a particular amount of time and generate income off that, that's like pre-planning where the asset's going and what it's going to be used for. The plant hours is kind of the retrospective version of that. So instead of booking the vehicle at the end of the day, you're saying we used the vehicle. I wonder if there isn't some way in the future to kind of bring those things together and use asset booking to plan the usage of vehicles as well. But anyway, something to think about. Maybe it's already 12 o'clock and we've been going an hour, so we better wrap up.
Yeah. Well, on that note, how is everybody going? Have we come to the end of today's meetup?
Any last questions?
Last questions? Well, okay, we'll say no. Thank you so much to, in order of appearance, Adam, and me, Adam, Anthony, Paul, Mark, Andrew from GeoSecure. Thank you so much for being here and making your contribution. It was very valuable.
Thanks for the invite.
Yeah, and so we'll see you guys all on the 3rd of October. Do make contact with your IT crowd to say whitelist Formbird emails if you can, if you're not getting invites. And thank you so much to all the people who turned up. We had a huge crowd today, so see you in October.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.
Thanks, everyone.
Bye-bye.